Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for 3 Blind Men and an Elephant, and today I want to talk about the Atomos Ninja 5 because it's the right product at the right time for some of us, and at the same time, a harbinger of what the next 2 years will bring. But first, as usual these days, a reminder, thanks to our friends at B&H, don't forget to enter our lighting giveaway. We've got some really nifty kit for you. Be sure to check out the links down below for how to enter. Okay. Bottom line, if you're buying into the Nikon Z, Canon R, or XT3 series with the idea of extracting maximum image quality and recording flexibility from them, the Ninja 5 would be at the top of my list. So let's get into it. Almost 1 year ago to the day, I reviewed the Atomos Ninja Inferno 7-inch recording monitor. A year and a half before that, I reviewed its Blackmagic design competitor, the Video Assist 4K. And 6 months before that, I reviewed the Inferno's predecessor, the Assassin. I'll put links to all 3 reviews in the show notes down below and up here if I remember, because there's no point in covering old ground. So I encourage you to take a look at them if you find questions remain unanswered at the end of this video. Other than to say that in every instance, I was really impressed by the screen clarity, the touch interface, and various assists because I could see what I was doing. But I didn't love the size, weight, or battery life, even with the big batteries. The real irony, though, was my indifference to, and hey, I know your mileage may vary, especially if ultimate data richness is critical to you for color grading or green screening, the signature feature of all of these recorders, namely 10-bit ProRes and DNX recording. That's because, at first, I didn't care. That's not what we do. And then about 20 months ago, once I started using a Panasonic GH5 with its unlimited internal 10-bit 422 recording, I had no compelling need. That is, if I wanted it at all. But it didn't. Not the 10-bit 422, anyway. As a one-man band who does all of our editing, no green screening, and where the only distribution medium for our client work, documentary work, and this YouTube channel is the web with all of the compression and dynamic range limitations which it imposes, I didn't want and saw no need for the effort, hardware overhead, or expense to support that kind of workflow for us. For me in particular, the more significant image quality parameter is 4K versus HD. I can live happily with 8-bit 420. I really can't with HD. But what really informed my view of the whole 10 and 12-bit path was a discussion I had back in the fall of 2016 with DP and educator extraordinaire Doug Jensen about the then new RAW recording option Sony had just made available for the FS5. I'll put a link to that conversation down below. I think it's worth the 40 minutes to go through the whole thing. Doug is a great guy, very knowledgeable, and I'm now privileged to call him my friend. But for me, the overarching takeaway after seeing his side-by-side testing was, and remains as I said above, all else being equal, for the work we do, 4K is much more important than moving to 10 bits or even 12. And remember, in case you didn't know this, as Doug reminded me, high-end dedicated cameras like his Sony f55 shoot in 16-bit color, which is high-end Hasselblad stills level. I don't know of another stills camera today that shoots with that bit depth, save for phase 1. The rest shoot at 14 or even 12-bit. In other words, to my eye, beginning as I did as a film-based photographer and coming to videography late in life, it's more important to have video resolution, which equals film. That is what I'm used to, rather than color depth. Especially when I can get that 4K resolution in something as small and accessible to my budget as a Sony A7 series or XT3 or now the Canon or Nikon with no add-ons, while the cost of getting to sublime color that 99.9% of our audience will never really see or appreciate means contending with, in addition to the price, the added weight complexity and extra batteries and cables that inevitably go along with that endeavor. Still, a big, bright screen with better focus and exposure assists, the real estate to display them without being on top of the scene itself, these are good things. In fact, I did attach an Assassin or Video Assist 4K to a tripod leg and use it as a monitor only on almost every one of the 22 episodes we did for our web documentary series, Mariner East. I also used them on occasion, and this was important, to allow you guys to see precisely what I was seeing as I peered through cameras I was testing. I will put down in the show notes below a link to the review I did of the Sony A99 II's autofocus as an example. This is a powerful gear reviewer's kind of combination, but attaching a 7-inch beast to that or any other hybrid and then working with it handheld in the field is terribly unwieldy. I always thought it would be great if these monitors were smaller, 5 inches like the old Ninja Blade, but that ship had sailed, as in discontinued. And it didn't record in 4K, but hold that thought. Then in January this year, as we began edging closer to replacing our Sony a6300 with what eventually we decided would be a Sony a7 III, still with a 30-minute recording limit and lack of a flippy screen, we got our hands on the smallHD Focus. That's a monitor only. I'll put a link to that review down below too. It was what so many of us who use cameras like the Sony a6 and a7 series were looking for. A gorgeous, bright, articulating display with a smartphone-like touch interface. Feathery lightweight, complete with bracket, rather novel bracket at that, and dummy battery allowing its Sony NP-style battery to power the camera to which it was attached. This was a great thing in an era of PEZ-sized batteries like the ones we have in the a6300. If smallHD had made the Focus with a built-in recorder, even if it were priced $100 or $200 more, we probably would have pulled the trigger on that a7 III. It would have allowed us to get around the recording limit and record all of our clips for especially YouTube gear reviews with a clearer view of what we were shooting and how we were shooting it. And gain the benefits of that full-frame sensor, certainly, in terms of image quality, and autofocus performance maybe. I still prefer focusing manually when shooting conversations. But it didn't, so we didn't. We waited. Long enough for a number of things to happen, including the arrival of Fujifilm's X-T3, Nikon's Z-Series, and Canon's EOS R. And finally, the Ninja 5, a smaller, lighter, 1000 nit, $300 less expensive 5-inch version of the Atomos Ninja Inferno, which, as it happens, means the brighter monitor recorder Ninja 5 is priced almost exactly $200 more than the base smallHD Focus monitor only, $100 more when comparing the bundled versions of each. If you already have a Sony NP-style battery or set of batteries, the base Ninja is all you need at $700. With a couple of batteries and a charger, it's $800. And with the Angelbird Atom X 500GB mini SSD, it's... Hold that thought. Everything came together a couple of weeks ago because it also happened to be the case that we had a Nikon Z7. Where is that guy? Over here. The Fujifilm X-T3, which we returned. The Canon EOS R over here. And even a Sony a7 II in-house for that crazy $998 sale. All with recording limitations lightened only, if at all, by sending the signal out through HDMI to an external recorder. And all, except for the EOS R, with the additional limitation of no flippy screen, which means nothing to some of you is meaningful to me. Your mileage may vary, that's fine. The up to 60 frames per second DCI 4K 10-bit 422 with ProRes and DNX HR recorded Ninja 5 press unit arrived courtesy of Atomos, so thank you guys. But because I'm slow, and we had only a week with it in the midst of so many other reviews, there wasn't enough time to put it through its proper paces, nor find all the gotchas between recorder and camera that one often sees. Although I did learn that the Nikon Z cameras 7 and 6 only at this juncture output a clean video signal via HDMI. Doesn't matter to filmmakers, does matter to gear reviewers. Hold that thought for another video. But what I can tell you, what I think is fair to say, is that for those of us who want to record as much information as possible from a 4K stream from these cameras, the Ninja 5 is the most compact, usable, and performant external recording monitor solution I know of, doing things neither the Focus, nor for that matter, Video Device's $1,000 Pixie 5 recording monitor, or the $495 Blackmagic Video Assist for that matter, can. The screen is gorgeous. The focus and exposure assists and the way you access them are first rate. There are slight differences between the two interfaces, but anyone familiar with Atomos' other recorders will immediately feel at home with the Ninja 5. The Ninja 5's 642 grams worth of recorder with battery and SSD plus 5-inch diagonal monitor and solid build quality combine to offer a Goldilocks solution, sitting midway between the thinner, lighter, and dimmer, actually at 800 nits monitor-only focus, which in turn is just about half the weight of the Ninja 5 at 366 grams, including battery and SD card for screenshots. And my older 400 nit, almost 1 kilo with SSD battery and cage, because its more plasticky build quality demands it, 7-inch Ninja Assassin. Blackmagic's $900 7-inch HDMI and SDI Video Assist 4K is significantly more robust than that Assassin, but even without a cage, it weighs just about as much, and only offers 300 nits of peak brightness using Canon-style batteries. Yes, if you can live without 4K, the Blackmagic Video Assist 5-inch 1080 recorder monitor is a relative bargain at $495 and uses less expensive media to boot, SD cards. Yes, using the regular Atomos caddy with the Ninja 5 is awkward because it sticks out past the body of the unit itself, making it impossible, for example, to use an L-shaped HDMI cable, though this is not a problem with the flush-fitting Atomos Mini SSD, but that package will set you back an even grand. Still, even though it's cheaper to buy a regularly sized SSD and take the convenience hit, I'd spend the extra money for the Angel Bird if you have it. Yes, it would be nice if the Ninja 5 came with the kind of bracket you can buy with the smallHD. And yes, it would be nice were it even thinner and lighter. You can never be too thin or too light. But really, this is all small change, which in turn makes for some interesting purchase alternatives. And this is what is so interesting to me. So buckle up. Here we go. You could, for example, drop $1,500 for an XT3 that can already record internally up to 60 frames per second in 10-bit 420 DCI 4K, up to 30 minutes, though with a modest crop. Now without the 4 gigabyte file limit. $2,000 to $2,100 if you add a small HD focus to overcome the absence of a flippy screen, but again, that's all it will do for you. Well, that's not quite right. As I've said, the assists and larger screen real estate are better than those of all of the cameras I mentioned here. Or $2,500 if you add the Ninja 5 with 0.5 terabyte Angel Bird Mini SSD with the same ability to overcome the absence of a flippy screen, plus the ability to record while shooting 10-bit 422 without limit. B, $2,000 for a full-frame A7 III, which can record internally up to 30 frames per second, up to 30 minutes in 8-bit 420 UHD 4K. $2,500 or $2,600 if you add a small HD focus, or $3,000 if you add the Ninja with 0.5 terabyte Angel Bird instead, to again get around the recording limit in absence of a flippy screen, though still only as good as the 8-bit 420 signal coming out from the Sony. You could drop the same $2,000 for a full-frame Nikon Z6. Clearly the sweet spot in the current Z series for hybrid shooters, I will have more to say about this in the coming days, which can record internally up to 30 frames per second, up to 30 minutes in 8-bit 420 UHD 4K, the same $2,500 to $2,600 to add a small HD focus, or $3,000 if you add the Ninja with Angel Bird 0.5 terabyte to get around the recording limit and the absence of a flippy screen, with the added bonus of now being able to record up to 10-bit 420. D, $2,300 for the EOS R, like the Sony A7 III and the Nikon, limited internally to 30 frames per second for 30 minutes in 8-bit 420 UHD 4K, though with a built-in twisty rear panel on the one hand, but a nasty 1.7x crop on the other. $2,800 or $2,900 if you had a focus, though much of its value is made redundant because of the Canon's rear panel. Or $3,300 if you add the Ninja 5 with Angel Bird Mini SSD 0.5 terabyte with the same ability to overcome recording limit, plus the ability to record in full-bit 10-bit 422. E, $3,400 for the Z7, which, like the Z6 Sony and Canon cameras, is limited internally to, again, 30 frames per second for 30 minutes in 8-bit 420 UHD 4K, though with a tilty-only rear panel, $3,900 or an even $4,000 if you add that focus, or $4,400 if you add the Ninja 5 with Angel Bird, with the same unlocked capabilities it offers the Z6, and of course the added benefit of 45 megapixels worth of stills performance, but you pay for that in compromises too. $6,000 for a Leica SL that can record internally up to 24 frames per second for 30 minutes in 8-bit 420 DCI 4K, but in Super 35 mode, with no articulating screen of any kind. $6,500 or $6,600 if you had a small HD focus to overcome that lack of an articulating screen. $7,000 if you add the Ninja 5, as I've articulated one would configure it, with the same ability to overcome recording limit and the absence of that articulating screen, plus the ability to record, again, in 10-bit 420. At which point, why not look at dedicated video cameras? Because, gee, the landscape in that segment has, of course, changed too. The Sony FS5 is now selling for $3,500. The FS5 II with ProRes RAW Atomos kit, including the Shogun Inferno, is now selling for $6,000. For $7,000, you can get an FS7, which will record unlimited 4K DCI up to 60 frames per second, HD up to 180 frames per second, and you have the option of dropping another $2,000 to get the 12-bit RAW extension unit. The Canon C200 with DCI 4K up to 60 frames per second, Cinema Raw Lite 12-bit Ninja Flame kit is selling for $8,000. And the Panasonic EVA 1 with ProRes RAW and Shogun Inferno is selling for $8,300. The FS7 II is selling for an even $9,000. Now, I'd call that one heck of a price range overlap with the, at least full-frame hybrids sporting a Ninja 5. Just a few years ago, literally 2015, the Canon EOS C300 Mark II, for context, launched at $16,000 body only. Of course, these kinds of cameras are far neater and more robust than hybrids because you don't, say, need an XLR mic adapter or neutral density filters because they're built in. You don't need an external recorder for 10-bit 422 the way you do the full-frame hybrids here. The dedicated cams can take bigger batteries in body. All are built from the ground up to dissipate heat because none of them have recording limits, and all of these cams do have the dual internal card slots. The Zs and EOS R don't, but the A7 III, GH5 and XT3 do. The FS7 has dual XQD card slots, and I have to say, I really like XQD. But then you also have the privilege of paying for that image quality and convenience, along with the weight and bulk that comes from upsized everything, from tripods to gimbals to Cineglass, which you can use on hybrids or with hybrids, though that defeats much of their advantage. And, of course, the dedicated video cams are useless for stills because that's not what they do. And they don't have IBIS. Your priorities will determine whether or not this matters to you. But this does bring us, finally, through the wormhole, because wrap your head around this. If you haven't done so already, you could, spend all of $1,700 for a Panasonic GH5, which does have a flippy screen, nice touch implementation at that, does have IBIS, just about the best in the business, save for its younger cousin, the G9, does not have a recording limit, and is capable of recording DCI 4K 10-bit 422 up to 60 frames per second internally. Of course, then you're living with the output from a much smaller sensor, but it's worth asking, what does that really mean? Sure, while full-frame cameras, most especially the A7 III and Nikon Z6 with their full-width readout and non-pixel binning 4K sensors, have compelling advantages over the GH5 in terms of autofocus, depth of field, and high ISO noise performance, especially, hey, they have these advantages over the dedicated cams I've just mentioned, too. It's also the case that if you're thinking about full-frame image quality, depth of field, and the 10-bit 422 recording the Ninja enables, odds are, 1, you're manually focusing anyway. 2, you're lighting your scenes so you can shoot at base ISO because you know that high ISO means dramatically narrowed dynamic range. And 3, you're choosing your glass wisely. If you are doing those things and can't stretch to something like Doug's 30,000 16-bit RAW F55, you just may be stunned by what the GH5 can do, leaving you funds for lighting, audio, and crew. Stunned to the point of grinning like a madman when you realize that with manual focus lenses like the 0.95 Noctons, or with a focal reducer from Metabones and say either of Sigma's 1.8 zoom twins, you can get depth of field as shallow as f1.9 on a full-frame camera, which is not easy to focus, even in autofocus, and potentially deliver better low-light performance than you might expect for a given depth of field. That's because a micro four thirds sensor essentially gives back 2 stops of additional light for the same depth of field. f2.8 on the GH5 at ISO 400, that's a depth of field equivalent to f5.6 on the A, R, or Z cameras, at which point you're shooting at ISO 1600. How much better are those full-frame sensors in low light than the GH5? Around 2 stops, give or take, according to DxOMark. You may be even more stunned by the XT3. This APS-C camera absolutely erodes full-frame and dedicated video cameras' advantages to the point that it practically demands you take a close look, especially when attached to the Ninja 5. Beyond offering the bit rates, bit depth, frame rates, and the resolutions of the lower end of the dedicated video cameras I've just mentioned, the XT3 also holds out the tantalizing possibility of doing everything the GH5 does, except for unlimited recording, and IBIS at the same or slightly smaller size, and delivering not only the depth of field equivalent of a full-frame f2 lens without the need for focal reducers or sub 1.0 aperture lenses, but excellent continuous video autofocus, including IAF, which none of these other cameras do. Think about that. I do. Though this would probably be a near-perfect use case for DJI's recently introduced Ronin S because the XT3 doesn't have in-body image stabilization. All of which, as I wrap this up, is a long way of saying that the arrival of the Ninja 5 and the Nikon Z, Canon EOS R, and the Fuji X-T3, the cameras for which it was designed, have me thinking that if we thought this year has been a crazy one for new camera introductions and sensor wars, the next 2 years are likely to be even crazier, giving certain camera manufacturers even more indigestion than they already have. It's not easy. While, on the other hand, saying absolutely nothing about what we do with this gear at a moment in time when we've never been able to do so much. But hold that thought for another time. I'm working on it. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below. You guys continue to be just incredible, knowledgeable, inspiring, funny. I mean, you're a joy, truly. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Grab one or both of our new Hold That Thought t-shirts you wanted us to put up at our new 3BMEPthreadless.com store. Support our work by using our affiliate links down below in the show notes, dropping us coffee money via our PayPal link down below in the show notes, or even better than that, we invite you to become a patron of our work over at Patreon. Link down below. We've created our Patreon page because we are stoked to bring you not only gear reviews, but with our What Were You Thinking and Good World Gone Bad series, historical, educational, artistic morsels, and longer form conversations, not interviews, with world-class photographers, curators, gallery owners, keepers of the legacy, folks like Elliot Irwitt, Anya Sear, Mark Lubell, Ethylene Staley, and friends like Brian Smith, Paul Giroux, Nino Rakicevic, and more. We'd really like you to join us to deliver this kind of content regularly. Your support on Patreon will really help us ramp it up. In which case, as always, we thank you for it. That's it. For 3 Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time.